Okay, you guys. You asked me for the short story, so I chose. It's called The Sugar Creek Gang. This is book 2, and that's because I realized that I don't have book 1. I have the whole series, but I don't have book 1. And this is called The Killer Bear. These books were in the library, and the librarians pulled the books out because nobody was checking them out. So if you find that you like this story, you talk to me because I took the set and I have them here at the house, and I would be very happy to share them with you. So just let me know. This is written by Paul Hutchins, and he dedicated these books to his 5 brothers, Leo, Forrest, Haven, Lester, and Carl, the best pals a boy ever had, and who lived and played with me along and in the real Sugar Creek. And the preface is by his daughter, Pauline Hutchins Wilson. Hi, from a member of the Sugar Creek Gang. It's just that I don't know which one I am. When I was good, I was little Jim. And when I did bad things, well, sometimes I was Bill Collins or even mischievous Poetry. You see, I am the daughter of Paul Hutchins, and I spent many an hour listening to him read his manuscript as far as he had written it that particular day. I went along to the North Woods of Minnesota, to Colorado, and to the various other places he would go to find something different for the gang to do. Now the years have passed, more than 50 actually. My father is in heaven, but the gang still goes on. All 36 books are still in print and are now being updated for today's readers with input from my 5 children, who also span the decades from the 50s to the 70s. The Sugar Creek Gang is in Indiana, and my father and his 6 brothers were the original gang. But the idea of the books and their ministry were and are the Lord's. It is He who keeps the gang going. It's funny, here it says 6 brothers. On this page, it says 5. I'm not sure what that's all about, but that's okay. Chapter 1. It was Dragonfly who first saw the bear, a big, hairy, black thing that looked more like one of my dad's hogs than anything else. None of us boys had ever seen an honest-to-goodness wild bear, although we'd all been to the zoo and the circus and had watched bears juggling rope balls and doing different kinds of acrobatic stunts. Naturally, we had read a lot of bear stories, having borrowed books from our school and public libraries. But we had never dreamed that a bear story would happen to us, the kind of story that would make a boy's hair stand right up on end. So you guys, have you ever seen a bear? I have seen 2 in the wild. Thankfully, I was in a vehicle both times. My sister and I traveled in Alaska, and one day we found a blueberry patch, and we were just in heaven, and we were sitting eating blueberries, and I looked at my sister and I said, you know what bears like to eat? Blueberries. And we left that blueberry patch pretty fast. Perhaps I'd better explain right away when I say us, I mean the Sugar Creek Gang, which is the name of our gang of 6 boys. We have crazy names, as nearly all boys do. That is, all of us except me. I'm just plain Bill, which is short for William, which name I don't like. My middle name is Jasper. I don't like that either. Dragonfly's real name is Roy Gilbert, but we call him Dragonfly because he's always seeing important things first. His eyes grow big when he does, making him look a little like a dragonfly or a wall-eyed pike. Then there is Big Jim, the leader of our gang, who has been a Boy Scout, and Little Jim, the grandest fellow you ever saw, and as good as $1 million worth of gold. Little Jim is my very best friend, except for Poetry. Poetry is the name we've given to Leslie Thompson because he knows maybe 100 poems by heart and is always quoting one of them, much to Circus's disgust. Circus is our acrobat. He can juggle baseballs better than any trained bear and is always climbing trees and acting like a monkey or looking like one. He is almost as mischievous as Poetry, although I don't think anybody could be that mischievous. Poetry is big, almost as big around as a barrel. That's all of us. Big Jim, our leader, Little Jim, the best Christian boy any boy ever saw, Poetry, whose voice is squawky like a duck with a bad cold, Dragonfly, whose eyes are as keen as a hawk's, and Circus, whose dad is always getting drunk. Circus has 4 sisters, one of them only about a month old, just 1 day younger than my own little sister, Charlotte Ann, who really ought to be in our gang too because she's so great. But she can't because she's too little, especially because she's a girl, and girls usually don't belong to a boys' club. Let me see. Oh, yes, I ought to tell you that Poetry has a tent in his backyard where our gang sometimes has our meetings. When we don't have them at the spring or at the big sycamore tree or on top of the hill on the east side of the big woods, where there are big rock and a big patch of wild strawberries. Well, I'd better get busy telling you about the bear. When we first saw her, she was way down along Sugar Creek, right in the middle of the swamp. She'd been wallowing in the mud the way black bears do in the summer when it's terribly hot. And that's why I told you the bear looked like one of my dad's big black hogs. Dragonfly had come over to my house right after lunch that day, and because it was so terribly hot, my mom and dad decided we can go swimming. Except that we had to wait an hour because it's dangerous to go in swimming right after a meal. You might get cramps, which is kind of like local paralysis, and you can't move your legs and you might drown. Maybe I'm going to be a doctor someday. That's how I happen to know the medical names for some things. Whew, I said when I'd finished eating. It's terribly hot. Then I said, "May I be excused, please?" That is what you're supposed to say when you leave the table before others do. "Certainly," Dad said. But Mom said, "I'm sorry, Billy, but I'll have to have help with the dishes today. It's wash day, you know." I looked at all those dirty dishes on the table, the plates and the cups and the saucers and my big black, blue and white mug out of which I drank milk 3 times a day. When I saw all the forks and knives and spoons and a big sack of other dishes, it actually hurt way down inside of me. I'd a whole lot rather be dunking myself in the old swimming hole in Sugar Creek than sloshing soapy water over dirty dishes. Hot water at that, on a terribly hot day. Then I happened to think about how much my mom loved me and how hard she had to work all the time to keep our clothes clean and the house and prepare the meals and take care of Charlotte Ann and how very tired she looked. So I just made myself smile and say cheerfully, "Sure, I'll help you. I can't go swimming for an hour anyway." There was another reason that I wanted to help Mom, which I can't take the time to tell you now. But when I'd been in the other room looking at Charlotte Ann and watching her drink her milk out of a bottle, I'd heard Dad say to Mom, "There's a little secret I want to tell you about Bill when I get a chance, you know." And then he told something to her. I told him that very morning, a secret that was the most important secret of my whole life. But I think I'll let you guess what it was. Pretty soon the dishes were finished and Dragonfly was there, and in a jiffy he and I, both barefoot and with our overalls rolled up so our toes wouldn't get caught in the cuffs, and sent us sprawling head over heels, went scuttling like wild things across the road, over the old rail fence and through the woods to the spring, where we knew the gang would be waiting for us. In 10 or 15 minutes, we were all there. all except little Jim, who took piano lessons and had to practice a whole hour every day, a half hour in the morning and a half hour right after the noon meal. He had taken lessons last summer too and could play a lot of things. Someday maybe he'd be a famous concert pianist. He knew the names of nearly all the famous musicians such as Bach and Beethoven and Wagner, or Wagner, sometimes people say. He even knew stories about different ones. Little Jim's mother was a wonderful musician, and she played the piano in our church on Sundays. Did you ever hear a flock of blackbirds in the autumn getting ready to fly south for the winter? Their voices are all raspy from chirping so much, and they seem to be squawking to the leaves of the trees to look out because pretty soon Jack Frost will get 'em, and they'll all have to die and be buried in a white grave. Well, when our gang gets together after we've been separated for a while, we're almost as noisy as 100 blackbirds. Blackbirds are what the winged notes on little Jim's music sheets look like. They almost make a fellow dizzy to even think of trying to play them. Pretty soon little Jim was there, carrying the stick he'd cut from an ash limb. He nearly always carried a stick. He came running down the hill with a straw hat in one hand and a stick in the other, his short legs pumping like a boy's in a bicycle race, with the dark curls on his head shining in the sun. And then we were all running as fast as we could toward the swimming hole. "Last one in's a bare tail," Circus cried over his shoulder. He was the fastest runner of all of us. He had his shirt off even before he got there, taking it off on the run. He was the first one in, all right, and I was the last. I was a little slow on purpose because I didn't want little Jim to be the bear's tail. "Bears don't have tails," Poetry called to Circus. "Neither do cows jump over moons," Circus yelled back. And that started Poetry off. "Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon." Circus made a dive for Poetry, caught him around the neck and dunked him a couple times, and said, quoting a poem to himself, "This is the cow with the crumpled horn that tossed the dog, that worried the cat, that caught the rat, that ate the malt that lay in the house that Jack built." Poetry looked disgusted at being called a cow and not being able to help it because he was so big. Well, we had water fights and diving and swimming contests until we were cooled off. Then we dressed and started looking for different kinds of shells. All of us were collecting shells for a hobby that summer. My time's running out, so we'll continue with the chapter next time.